Hi, this is Sam Proctor with the USC Service Department, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to set up seed profiles, chemical profiles, and chemical recipe profiles on your system. So, when you first boot up your system, this is what you're going to see. Just the main uTreat splash screen, letting you know what kind of treater you have and whether or not you have the bin site automation with it. So from here, we're just going to go ahead and click anywhere on the screen, and it's going to take us to our main treater screen. So, first thing we're going to talk about is how to set up your seed profiles. To get to the seed profiles, we are going to go into the utility screen and then go to product editing. So this is what the product editing screen looks like. You have your list of profiles on the left, and you have your editing portion for that profile on the right hand side. So this is where you're going to come to set up each individual seed type that you have, whether it be different varieties of soybeans, if you guys are treating wheat, or whatever the case may be. So all you do is you click on one, and you can overwrite any of the ones that are already pre-saved. So we'll just go ahead and go to corn. Here we can rename. We can also type in our variety, the lot number, how many seeds per pound, what the seeds per unit is for that specific type of seed, the cup to pocket ratio. If you're doing soybeans, we'll probably start that at about 2.5. Basically what that is how many of your 10 cups for your cup weights can fit into one seed wheel pocket. And then we have our cup weight down here. So once we have all this information entered in, then you have your flashing save button down at the bottom, just letting you know that something has been changed on this screen. So we need to go ahead and save the changes. And then now we have our new test profile over here. And so this is what you're going to select whenever you're running either from a bin, or this is what you're going to tie to a bin if you have a bin site, or if it's just a standalone treater, this is the information that is going to be pulled when it saves to the reports. Next, we're going to talk about how to set up your chemical profiles. So we're going to go ahead and start from this main splash screen again. We're going to go ahead and click anywhere on the screen to get us to that main treater screen. So there are two different paths that you can take to get to the chemical editing screen. The first one is by clicking up here in the target rate box, and it automatically takes you to the chemical editing screen. You can also get to the chemical editing screen if we exit out of here by going to utilities, then to security, typing in our password, which is just USC, then going into tools and options, and then we have chemical editing right here. It doesn't matter which way you go, it's the same screen. We just put them in multiple different areas so you don't have to back out to a specific screen to get to any of these editing screens. So if you notice here, it has a similar layout to the seed profiles. So you have your profile list on the left, and you have your editing portions here on the right. So just go ahead and make one here. On the barcode for both the seed profile, chemical profile, and the chemical recipes, you don't need to worry about that. So if you see that on any of your editing profiles, just go ahead and ignore it and just rename whatever the chemical you want to use. So we'll just go ahead and edit over this water one here. So we can just go ahead and click here on the name and rename it. And then we have our target rate, so how many ounces per hundredweight you want to put it on at, our chemical calibration factor, the measurement type, so whether you're wanting to put it in ounces per hundredweight, or if you click the button, it will toggle to ounces per unit, which also changes your target rate application. And then if you're using a loss and weigh pump, then you can also change the density down here. The chemical calibration factor you won't necessarily change manually here. You'll actually go into the chemical calibration screen to actually change that. So once you have all of this stuff set up, just go ahead and change that to a 2. Again, you look down here and our save button is flashing, so that means we need to go ahead and save this, and then we have our new chemical profile on the left. The last one we're going to talk about is how to set up a chemical recipe profile. So, a chemical recipe is basically a profile that you can set up to designate a specific chemical that you've already created to a specific pump stand that you have. And then in that recipe you can tell whether that pump stand is being used within that recipe or not being used within that recipe. So let's go ahead and dive in. Again, we're starting at the main splash screen here. Click anywhere, it's going to take you to the main treater screen. So, normally if you don't have the recipes enabled, you can come up here to where it displays the chemical names for each pump stand and change it here. I actually already have the chemical recipes enabled, and so what that does is it puts little hash marks here, and so you have to change the chemical names per pump stand in the chemical recipe screen. So the way we get to the chemical recipe editing screen is we go into Utilities and then Recipe Editing, and here we are. So up here is where we tell the system whether we are using the recipes or not using the recipes. We need to make sure that is on, and then again we have a similar layout. We have profile list left, editing portion on the right. So we'll just go ahead and click on one of the unused ones here, and we'll go ahead and rename this first one. Okay, and then down below here we have one for an auxiliary control, so that would be any sort of manual pump stand or dry additive feeder or something like that that you might have plugged into the treater that's not fully automated like your regular automated pumps are. And then down below we have the list of the 3 automated pump stands that we have enabled here. So what we can do is we can come to each one of them and pick which chemical, which we've already created, goes to which pump stand. So pump 2, we'll just go ahead and select test chem 3, and then pump number 3 we will select test chem 2. Then what we have to do is we have to tell it whether we are using these or not. So right now each one of them is in the off position, so if we saved the recipe as is, when we selected it, it would actually put all of our pumps in the off position and no pumps would run during the automated run. So for this first example, we'll go ahead and we'll leave the aux control off, but we will turn on pumps 1, 2, and 3 by clicking on the off buttons. Turns it to auto. Now again, down below here we've made some changes, so we can go ahead and save this recipe, and it appears on our list on the left. So we'll go ahead and make a couple more just so you can kind of see what it actually does within the system. So we'll just click on another unused one. We'll rename the recipe. On this one we'll say, leave that we'll just leave the same chemicals in each pump. And you do have to select which chemical goes into each pump stand for each individual recipe. So for this one we'll say auxiliary control is being used, pump 1 is being used, but the other 2 are not. Make one more here. And on this one we'll just say we're just using the main chemical that's in pump 1. Okay, so now we have our 3 recipes selected here. So now if we come out here, back to the main treater screen, you can see it's already designated the correct chemicals for each pump. Now, to check or to change the chemical recipe, it depends on whether you have the full bin site or if you only have a standalone treater automation. So with this one, since we have the bin site automation selected, I'll just show you how to do it from there first, and then we'll disable the bin site and show you how to do it there. So from here, we're going to go ahead and jump over to the bin site side of the automation, and then when we hit our start button, we have the recipes down here. So right now we have recipe 1 selected, which was all 3 pump stands minus the auxiliary control. So we'll go ahead and we will change this to recipe 2, and then we'll exit out, go back to the treater, and then if we go into HOA, we should only have the first chemical and our auxiliary control selected in auto. Now I'm going to go ahead and back out, and I'm going to change it to recipe 3, just so you can see the change. And with this recipe, the only thing that should be in auto is pump 1. So we'll go back to the treater screen, back into the HOA screen, and it has shut the auxiliary control off. Now, when you have a recipe selected, you can put other things into auto, but the minute you leave the screen and head back in, it defaults them all back to whatever the recipe is calling for. So as long as you have those recipes enabled and set up correctly, then you'll never run into a situation where it will not have one selected or have one selected that you don't want to run for that run. Okay, I went ahead and went through and disabled the bin site. So now we're just going to look at a standalone treater and how you would select your different recipes when it's just a treater. So if we exit out here and we hit the start button that's here on the treater screen that has showed up now that we have the bin site disabled, down below, just like we did on the bin site side, we have our chemical recipe selection. And then from here, select whichever recipe we'll want to do for that run. And we can always double check ourselves to make sure that the correct pumps are in auto and the ones we don't want to use are in off. So that's how we set up our seed profiles, chemical profiles, and recipe profiles.